Hello, I'm Brian Callanan. How much of an impact will the City Council's plan to create upzones across Seattle have? What does news about Amazon changing up a major land deal downtown mean for our economy? And how are council members reacting to the mayor's State of the City priorities? Council members Juarez, Herbold, and Mosqueda. Join me to answer these questions and the ones you're sending in too. Next on Council Edition.
Whether or not it's the answer and this will solve the housing crisis, we have to say this is not enough alone.
We have a goal of 80 new hires this year to catch up with where we've lost ground.
You need to invest in Seattle and understand the sensibilities of our city.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. And joining us, we have council members Juarez, Mosqueda, and Herbold. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to jump right into it and talk about the State of the City. Happened just recently here, held in the D5, as you know. It's Mayor Jenny Durkins' second State of the City for Seattle. How are her priorities matching up with yours? What did you draw from that speech?
Well, her priorities, of course, are matching up perfectly with ours in D5 because we are looking at density, growth, transportation. But two of the, what I would say, crowning glories that are happening up in D5, which the mayor talked about, which we and my colleagues also helped do during the budget, is number one is our Promise program. One of the people speaking who was one of our high school kids from Ingram High School for the Promise program, where you have those first 2 years of college for free. And the second piece, which I'm really excited about, is we passed in the budget money for a feasibility study at North Seattle College. So we can start looking at trades. And we can have those first 2 years so we can actually have family wage jobs. So it isn't just academics are great, but it's wonderful to say, look, we're working with building and trades, we're working with labor, and we want to cite this program at North Seattle College so we can expand beyond that. But for us, as you know, we have North Seattle College going up, we have our bridge coming in, our pedestrian bike bridge, we have our 3 sheets of ice with NHL, and we're really focused not only on transportation, but something these two women to my left have been working on, my colleagues, besides transit-oriented development and housing, but we're really pushing transit-oriented childcare.
Right. Big piece of it. I'm going to get into the development piece in just a little bit. But Teresa, maybe I can go to you here. Reactions to what you heard. I know the mayor mentioned you and the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. Thoughts about what you heard, the priorities the mayor's outlined for the years ahead?
Well, it's pretty exciting to look back on a year's worth of work. We are the first city to have passed a Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And I was with Congresswoman Jayapal last weekend. She and Kamala Harris are introducing the National Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. Yet again, Seattle's leading the way in labor standards. What we do here matters, not just for our local community, but across the nation. So it was nice to see that highlighted. Excited to hear about the expansion of the ORCA cards, especially for working families, and looking forward to see how we can expand that to more workers throughout Seattle. We know, for example, a lot of people have to bring their car to work, for example, if they have tools to work in construction. One of the big issues we're interested this year in is how do we partner with contractors to make sure that their employees, if they're working on behalf of the city, that they also get an ORCA card. One of the things that I think she highlighted was the investment in housing. And I think it's important to break down that number a little bit. We have the biggest housing crisis in our city. And many cities are actually looking at us and saying, well, how do we prepare? How do we protect? Or how do we be more proactive than Seattle has been? Because we could not anticipate this growth. I think the number that was cited was $710 million. That is over 2 years, though. So I want to make sure that our Seattle audience knows and our regional partners know really what we've done over the last 2 years in terms of Seattle dollars is $94 million in 2017 and $75 million last year, which means that the rest of the $541 million came from our state, our regional, and our county partners. We need them to continue to step up so that we can make historic investments in housing, which will help our folks here. And overall, we just can't stop. I don't want folks to hear historic investment and think we've checked the box and we can walk away. The Chamber of Commerce's own report said we need $410 million a year in this region to build housing. So it was a great investment. I'm proud to have been working with her on those investments. And let's just not check the box because we have so many folks who need housing. I'm
going to come back to you on that housing issue in just a second. But Lisa, let me talk to you. One piece of the State of the City I found interesting. The mayor was talking about trying to prevent displacement. You're working with her on this community preference issue. I wondered if we could focus on that. that piece?
I'm so excited about this. This is an issue that was raised during the Chinatown International District mandatory housing affordability legislation deliberations that the council was engaged in 2017. And when we pass MHA legislation, we have it accompanied by a resolution that identifies what the priorities are for that particular community. We're doing that with the citywide legislation. We've done it for each of the area-wide pieces. And this was addressing displacement and specifically creating a new community preference policy so that people who have been displaced from the community can have a preference to come back when we build new housing. Was identified as a top priority of members of the Chinatown International District.
Okay.
This is something that they're already trying out. Capitol Hill Housing is doing a community preference program up at Liberty Bank with the housing project up there. And it's really an exciting tool, but it is really just one tool. We're really limited by fair housing laws on how much we can preference historically displaced people.
Right.
And we have to do it in such a way that we're in accordance with fair housing law, and in preferencing one group, we're not harming another group.
Right.
So it's a limited tool, and there's much more that we have to do, and that's why I've introduced a piece of legislation that also relies on fair housing law.
Right.
The displacement mitigation ordinance relies on our legal obligation under fair housing law to proactively promote fair housing when the patterns that we see in our city are that people of color and other protected classes are being displaced out of the city. When we see those patterns, we have an affirmative obligation to do something about it.
Right.
And so this legislation would require developers, only in those cases where they're removing existing affordable housing, to contribute a little bit more so we have a net gain of affordable housing.
Okay, and I'd like to try to broaden things out for housing affordability a little bit, because I know you guys are in the middle of a situation here with mandatory housing affordability out of committee before the full council right now. Teresa, maybe I can start with you. Did the package the council put together, at least put together so far, provide a good answer to our affordable housing crisis? I'm thinking about 6,000 homes. That's what's being provided here over the next 10 years. I know that's going to make an impact, but is it enough is always the big question here. Your thoughts to open this up.
I want to be really clear. This is the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg in terms of the types of changes that are needed. It is going to make a meaningful impact across our city. Whether or not it's the answer and this will solve the housing crisis, we have to say this is not enough alone. This is a piece of the puzzle. So let me tell you why.
Okay.
We're only really addressing 6% of the land in our city that's zoned for single-family use. 6% of the land now has opportunities now for duplexes and triplexes, some apartments, maybe condos, additional townhouses, row houses. That's gentle infill density. What I think we need to do is to be bold and to really evaluate what we need to do to look at the rest of the city that has 2/3 of its land that is currently zoned for detached single-family homes. That doesn't mean bulldozer coming. That doesn't mean that your home is going to be torn down. It means actually legalizing the ability to have condos and apartments and duplexes and triplexes, quite literally the fabric of what our city used to be. You've heard me mention before that I live in an apartment. I'm on the 4th floor of a 4-story building. It's a beautiful brick building. That building is currently considered illegal because we have downzoned over the centuries. And I'd like to offer for your viewers a chance to take a look that we've really actually in our history carved out more of the city for single-family use. And what has the consequence been? Fewer people can afford to live in the city. They get pushed out and have to commute 90 minutes into their place of work, or they get priced out of the city with the average cost of a home being over $700,000 right now, and many of them are falling into homelessness. So I think we did a good first step, and I'm really proud of this council. I'm proud of the work that has been done over the last 4 years, and I also recognize that we have much more to do to undo the public policies that were passed that were centuries old, but actually just a few decades old as well, that were really rooted in racist redlining policies that we have the opportunity through future public policy to change.
I want to make a quick
Please,
plug. So the Seattle Planning Commission has a fantastic report that basically has as its foundation the point that Councilmember Mosqueda is making. It's looking at the areas that traditionally allowed for greater density and trying to apply those same approaches in maybe sections of areas that are single-family housing, while also allowing for more development within single-family housing. But looking at, for instance, the corners and allowing for more density there within single-family zones, while also looking at increasing residential small lot throughout the city. It's really, really exciting work, and I think they're really doing a good job of having a planning perspective as well, not just let's build everything everywhere, but they're really using a planning lens to accomplish what our goals are, which is ultimately to increase housing availability.
Let me put a finer point on it. Lisa, I'm going to stay with you for a second here. I'm going to throw in a tweet here. We got one from one of our viewers who writes, wouldn't the prudent next step during a housing emergency be a statewide ban on single-family zoning, which is what Oregon legislature is considering? That said, thanks for MHA. Hugh writes that. I'm bringing this up because I know there was contention among this group here, even that's at this table, with regard to what happens in certain neighborhoods. There was this amendment specifically, this clawback amendment, as it was called, to try to protect some of these different areas, specifically saying if this affordability piece was found illegal by a court, then some remedies could be made or whatever else. This was something you sponsored. I know there was some talk about this. I'd like to talk about that briefly. Why'd you do that piece?
I think these are really two different issues.
Okay.
What we should be doing in single-family zoning and how we should be having a conversation about how to add capacity for infill housing there, I think is really a separate issue from the mandatory housing affordability program, which was specifically designed as an exchange of value program. That's how it was negotiated. That's why it was called the Grand Bargain. I'm really committed to having that conversation about increasing capacity of our currently single-family zoned areas, and I really believe passionately that the work that we've done with MHA is going to help pave the way for those conversations.
And Deborah, I want to make sure I bring this up because I thought it was very important to point out the neighborhood groups who were really challenging MHA, they didn't come from District 5 up north.
No.
This was an area that it's clamoring for growth up there. I wanted to talk about that and your thoughts about this.
Two things. First of all, I'm glad you mentioned that because as Councilmember Herbold was saying, I was listening, and I believe Councilmember Mosqueda and I were both of no vote on the clawback. But let me get back to what you're saying. This is why district representation is so important, because if you live in that community and you know the people and you know the neighborhoods and you understand the sensibilities. So I think what you saw me is I had 10 amendments and all of them were built around expansion because we are expanding, but we are very cognizant of those neighborhoods that are single-family zoned and the need that time changes. And I have been out in the community. I have a district office every Friday. I talk to these folks. I've been in that neighborhood for almost 33 years. So I know the areas of pockets where we're going to look at more growth.
Wait, you're 36 years old?
Yeah, 36. I'll be 37 in July.
Copy.
But one of the things that I think nobody saw coming, which I did, not that I'm not smart, but what was exciting is that, MHA came from HALA and all those, and I commend you, Councilmember Herbold, because you were involved in that. And I think what people are forgetting about the mandatory housing affordability and us moving forward, it really is about the future and that Seattle is growing. When people are upset that I bought my house in 1978, I bought it in 1981, yes, but change is coming. That is just how the world works. So when we were looking at MHA, when we were doing our amendments and we were focusing on expansion, and no one from D5 was involved in the lawsuit as well. But my point was, one of the things that came out of MHA is that we got an expansion for North Haven, which is a residential home for elders, but we went from 4,000 to 10,000 square feet so we could provide medical and dental, not only for our elders living there that are low income, but other elders to come there as well. So MHA has become a tool not just for people thinking it's, it's either a sword or a shield. You're coming in to take our home, to take our lot away, or you're trying to carve out from MHA so you don't have to participate. And my overarching goal has been, my beacon, my signal has been that we all have a responsibility to right this historical wrong, and we all have to shoulder pushing out that we have housing and Seattle is for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's that's the perspective I come from. But having the on-the-ground neighborhood and knowing where those pockets are, because I had about 18 amendments and I pushed 10 of them because the other 8 just weren't in line, which I believe is the principle and the spirit of the law of MHA and HALA.
And I thought that was a very interesting dynamic here with regard to the at-large council members and the district council members. There was a lot of back and forth there. And Teresa, I know you put your hand up to say something about this.
I just want to point out again, Councilmember Juarez began to say that this is not just about the buildings. Everyone thinks that this is about the type of buildings that we're creating. If you look at the package that we passed, it's about the livability. It's about creating more opportunity. It's about the number of people that can live in Seattle. And not only just live there, but have a senior center, have a health clinic, have a dental clinic. One of the things that I was able to co-sponsor was a child care amendment, which gave an incentive, extra floor area ratio for developers who actually put child care on the first floor, on the second floor, anywhere in the building so that we can create access to childcare. Actually, in Washington State, we have some of the highest childcare desert density in our region than in the entire country, which means people have a hard time finding childcare. Not only did we create incentives like that so that people have grocery stores and senior centers and childcare, we did setbacks, so there'd be more light, there would be more trees, there would be more green space, people could walk around. As we create opportunities for folks to live in the city, we also are cognizant of the facts that our parks, which Councilmember Juarez chairs, and our green spaces, these are the backyards, the play areas for more of our community. So we coupled those together in a very cognizant way to make sure it's not just about building tall and building to the corners, but that we're building smart and we're doing density done right.
Briefly, please.
I just wanted to add really briefly, when we talk about livability and what Councilor Mosqueda was saying, I also pushed hard, and I think my colleagues did as well, that we expanded sidewalks and pedestrians, an additional 20 blocks on Aurora for pedestrian safety. So these are corridors that have been long overlooked. So people can get to the bus stop. And so that's my other point.
Lisa.
Don't want to forget small business. We also did work within the mandatory housing affordability rezones to help incentivize the types of spaces that small businesses can afford, so that when redevelopment happens, the developers are building smaller spaces with lower rents rather than large spaces that just attract big box businesses.
Thank you very much for that. I need to talk about a big box business with Amazon here, Lisa. I'm going to stick with you here. I tried, every now and then. Some interesting news from the tech giant, as we know. Not only is it going to not build an HQ2 in New York, but Amazon's pulling out of a deal to house thousands of its employees in Rainier Tower downtown. You took a trip to New York before Amazon made this decision. Teresa went as well. I wanted to set this up with a tweet, bit of an edge to it to set this up here. It goes like this: the large amount of your constituents who appreciate Amazon and want them here find this embarrassing. Help me out with this. Your response to Amazon pulling out of New York, this issue with the Rainier Tower, what do you got?
Well, I think it's a misnomer to say that they're pulling out of Rainier Tower. They are not going to be the tenant.
They're subleasing.
But they're subleasing. And they are very likely subleasing at a profit that they will share with the developer, Wright Runstad. So I think we really have to keep an eye on what's happening in this instance. And also, I
guess, is it a concern is where I was
They're on their way to occupying 25% of Seattle's grade A office space. Just like in personal investment, we're told that we should diversify our investment. I believe that that's the same principle that we should use in municipal economic development, that we should make sure that our base of businesses is broad and that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. So having Rainier Tower be available for other businesses, I think, is really healthy.
And Teresa, I'll throw another edge on this one too. Here comes a tweet your way. How about, given that Amazon isn't going to fill up its downtown building, be a good corporate citizen and give or lease low-cost space to Seattle Public Schools for a downtown school? If the City Council pushed, it might happen, and win-win for all. Melissa, thank you very much for the tweet. I wanted to breach this whole idea of Amazon with you here. Potentials for Rainier Tower, what you thought about New York, any other thoughts there?
Well, Melissa, thank you for your creativity. Appreciate that.
We'll see.
And we are actually looking at every vacant building to see how we can house folks. Not just, that's a great idea around education opportunities, but the pressing crisis crisis right now is really around homelessness. That said, we need partners who are going to stay at the table and be at the table and play their role in helping to make sure that we have the funding needed to house people. I want to be really clear with folks. I've had a lot of people say, thank you for going to New York, to Nashville, to DC, because our values in Seattle don't stop at our borders. We value being able to have workers who live in our city. We value labor protections. We value investments in transit and roads. And we in Seattle didn't have the crystal ball to see 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. We could not anticipate the type of growth that was generated in Seattle since the beginning of this decade. There is an opportunity for cities that are thinking about having any industry come, but especially one that grows so fast like the tech industry, to learn from Seattle's example. Change your zoning laws quickly, invest in infrastructure, create bus lines, trains, and most importantly, invest in low and middle income housing. That is a smart business decision. When your workers can walk to work, take the bus, they can get there on time. It is actually good for business when you have that type of investment. And we did a good job in Seattle on leading on labor protections. But what I heard from folks across the nation was, thank you for the heads up, because now we can be more proactive on investments in infrastructure, transit, housing. I think it's really important that we create opportunities to learn from our lessons learned here, share those examples with our colleagues who are across the country. Nothing, I want to be very clear, nothing that was said in New York or when I went to DC and Nashville should have indicated to anybody that it was anti-business at all. When you invest in housing, when you invest in transit, when you invest in worker protections, it is good for the bottom line of your local economy. So high road employers should not walk away from conversations like that. And we think that we've done a good job at being a place where you can foster business here in Seattle. We have some of the most prosperous companies in the country, and we want to keep that growing, but we have got to invest in infrastructure, housing, and transit.
Where are you going with this one, Lisa?
Evidence of that, again, is the fact that our real estate experts in this region say that because we have such a squeeze for availability of office space, that the Rainier Tower is going to be highly sought.
Yeah. And I can't get to your piece that you're working on with the gig economy, but I know that's an interest for workers out there too. So we'll talk about that later on. Deborah, did you have any piece that you wanted to interject here with regard to what's happening?
Yeah, I do. I'm really tired of talking about Amazon.
Okay.
I'm just tired of it, and I'll tell you why. I appreciate my colleagues' comments and Councilmember Mosqueda and Herbold going to New York and saying lessons learned, but I've met with those folks as well. And you know me, I'm very candid. My opinion is nobody won in the New York deal. There was not even a villain. The governor should have stayed at the table. They should have stayed at the table. I spoke to and met with the people in DC on the Amazon folks. And, you know, and I'll say on TV and to everybody who'll listen what I told them to their face. You need to invest in Seattle and understand the sensibilities of our city. We are not LA, we're not Dallas, we're not New York, we're not Virginia, we're not Nashville. Every city is different. You can't come with one blueprint and say, this is how we're going to do it. And you know what? It was a really good conversation. It wasn't, you know, I was just very candid. I was very disappointed when I said the very thing you threatened us with, that if you don't do this, we're not going to fill up the Rainier Square. And then you did it anyway. Bad form. I got a problem with that. So I agree with my colleagues to my left, but my other side is I was more concerned about those other 599 businesses. I think we made Amazon kind of the punching bag, the kind of go-to thing, and it just got people crazy and not really talking about what we needed to do. And you know me, I'm a negotiator. I'm a deal maker. I want to build things and get things done. I don't want to wave some political banner and go on and on and on. I just don't. I don't have time for it. And you know, I'm 29, so I got a few more years left in me to do this.
You just aged yourself a few less there, but that's all right. I wanted to follow up though, Deborah. You made this trip back east recently, not only with regard to Amazon or whatever else, but the National Congress of American Indians. Can you branch out on a little bit about what you were doing there? I know you were meeting with some of our elected officials there as well.
Well, actually, I went back, and I do it every year, to go meet with our congressional delegation. The city of Seattle has a lobbyist, Leslie Polner, who's phenomenal, and she sets up meetings. So I got an opportunity to meet with Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell. Wonderful opportunity to sit down with our new representative, Dr. Kim Schreier. And we did every year National Congress of American American Indians does the honoring lunch for Native American women and leaders. And I was there with Senator Warren to honor our brand new Congresswomen, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland. And that was exciting to see two Native women, two sisters, two women that I know that I was happy to see win in Congress. But when we sat down with Senator Murray, what we focused on was infrastructure and the money that is coming to the state of Washington.
Right. Yeah.
So we got another cycling that's going to come in where there's going to be, I think, up to $900 million that we're going to be taking a shot at. And that's what I talked to Senator Murray about.
Yeah.
Wonderful conversation with Senator Cantwell on the Violence Against Women Act and its reauthorization. I know that the tribes in the cities have some amendments that they want to make, so that will happen next month. And also we talked about Savannah's Act, which I am proud to say, as Councilmember Macedo was saying earlier, City of Seattle is ahead of this country, and that we have already looked at the study that Abigail Elkahawk did out of the Seattle Indian Health Board on missing, murdered, and Indigenous women and data collection. So I was really focusing with Senator Cantwell, who, by the way, Senator Cantwell and Murray are always at our luncheons, as are other senators. So these weren't so much women issues, but they were violence issues, jurisdictional issues, infrastructure.
And they're nationwide issues.
And I think what people don't realize when we go back to D.C., and I met with the Amazon folks, is that it's a two-way street. I go back to meet with our congressional delegation to learn what money's there and what we can get for our city, but they also want to know from me, what is going on in Seattle? What's happening? First thing Senator Murray said, which I appreciated, is what's going on with the homelessness issue? Here's the money that we got. How are we working on a county solution? And I appreciate that their pulse is on the city of Seattle and us getting us money.
Good point. And I need to try to pick up the pace just a little bit here because I wanted to cover some more ground here. Teresa, a super important piece. You serve as vice chair on the Public Safety Committee. Seattle PD is in the middle of this campaign to offer new bonuses to hires out there. If they're new recruits, they come from another police department. Help me out briefly if you can. Why is this needed? What do you hope it accomplishes?
Well, what we've seen over the last few years was actually pretty steady rates of employment, hire, and a little bit too much turnover. What we saw last year in 2018 was a very significant dip in the number of new hires, transfers, and our retention rate. Part of that might be due to the fact that our officers didn't have a contract for 4 years. We did pass a contract last year, offers payback for some of the missed years of not having a contract, which is critical. Let's be real. If we want there to be community-led enforcement in our streets, we want folks who are from those communities. We want people who are known, trusted partners. So it's important that they have a living wage for Seattle. I think that can make a dent. But what we are also considering, and what passed out of the committee last week, was offering an incentive bonus for lateral hires and for new hires. There's three things that were included in the legislation because I was initially concerned, if not opposed, that actually helped me get more comfortable with it. Number one, there's a sunset that's been added. Number two, there's accountability provisions so we can actually check to see if those incentive dollars are being used to bring in new folks. And number three, it's not just for lateral. It's for now new hires so that we can make sure that there's more women, people of color, and younger folks coming in to meet our diversity goals.
Very, very big piece. Yeah, Lisa.
Just a little bit of additional background on why it's so important that the members of the Public Safety Committee included funding for the new hires. We have a goal of 80 new hires this year to catch up with where we've lost ground. We only have a goal of 20 lateral hires. We've already done, I think, 9 of them. So we need to make sure that we are spending just as many resources on recruiting new hires, if not more. We should be spending 80% of our resources towards recruiting new hires and fewer resources towards the lateral, because that's really where we have to make up the ground.
An important footnote. These are no new dollars. These are already dollars that were allocated in last year's budget, already dollars that were assumed in the contract. So I want to make sure that Seattle knows we're not adding money to the contract that was just passed. These are dollars that were never spent because we hadn't filled those slots.
Got it. You had a brief note to make. We're out of time here. What did you want to bring across? There was one last piece.
I just want to talk about NHL at Northgate. Yes. Our $80 million facility is going to happen. 3 sheets of ice, 2 hotels. We are working really closely with OVG and the owners of Northgate Mall, which is Simon Brothers. And I just want to say D5 is about density, and it's popping.
All right. Hope you get to drop that first puck.
I am going to. I've already asked.
What do you want it to be named?
Ooh.
The Sockeyes.
Oh boy, here we go.
The mayor wants the Kraken, which is kind of lame. I'm just going to say it.
No, already want a Stanley Cup.
Anything there?
I mean, I like Seattle Freeze, but I could go with the Sockeyes.
Okay. We'll get back to you on that. Thank you all for your input.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on Council Edition.